it's usually not a great idea to guess someone's age. But in the case of Roblox, facial age estimation technology has been implemented to try and keep kids safe online. Today on the Biometric Update Podcast, I talk with Jake Parker of the Security Industry Association about how platforms are deploying facial age estimation and addressing some of the concerns around the technology. Roblox is the sort of ostensibly what we're here to talk about today. It is sort of, one of many platforms that is adopting age assurance in response to this global wave of legislation that has sort of, brought online safety laws into the headlines. So, if you can give me a brief sort of opinion or overview or some thoughts on, what do you make of all this online safety legislation?
Certainly agree with the intent of the legislation. Let's try, the efforts to try to make sure that, users are only accessing age-appropriate content or being protected online in their interactions. But there, Europe is doing kind of a set of things on this, and then the U.S. and various states are doing other things. So I think it's pretty early to tell how the requirements get implemented in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
I know, so there's a couple different sort of categories of state legislation, for example, in the U.S., where addressing this, where most recently it's been, for example, there's a law passed in New York about age verification for social media applications specifically, and then also Texas and Louisiana and Utah recently on App Store requirements for age requirements and parental consent. But I think the court system, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because while well-intentioned, those measures are already been subject to court challenge over First Amendment concerns and other things. And I think it's pretty likely that those will not survive the court challenge. So the reason being that in the U.S. precedent here, it looks like that the courts are requiring protection from very specific harms to children to be the rationale for requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the laws will get refined, or narrowed in some way to continue. But in any case, I think we're going to see this feature proliferate, though, because if you look at Roblox's announcement, they're saying that this process could end up being required, but we're doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It'll help with compliance if it's required, but we're doing it anyway. So
it's interesting, in the States, it seems to have divided between sort of the adult content laws, which are, generally passing, and then the social media age assurance laws, which are generally getting blocked on First Amendment grounds. And then you have Roblox, which is kind of a gaming platform, which is something else altogether. I mean, it's social, but it's also not primarily a social media network. So that's interesting to see where that kind of fits in, and what other platforms and types of sites will be drawn into the debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the sheer popularity of it, the massive number of users it has, it will definitely be an interesting sort of test case here, because I think it's this week that they're trying to enforce all of the new policies they implemented earlier this fall.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about facial age estimation. This is still kind of a new technology to many. This is what Roblox has decided to do for access to its chat feature. And they've got the biometrics firm Persona providing this service. But it's still, again, a relatively new technology. Where, from your perspective, is facial age estimation at? Because there are also some concerns about, how accurate it is at certain age levels.
Yeah, so here, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, is doing world-leading work on evaluating those technologies. They actually, a couple of years ago, created a special program for face analysis technology evaluations, which include age estimation, among other things. And definitely encourage taking a look at that. They actually have a leaderboard of different algorithms and what their performance is over various types of tests. And so they're testing based on kind of real world applications that people are using and asking for. And so it's interesting. It's hard to really generalize. You don't want to generalize when you've got so many different type of testing evaluations. But one of the tests they have is how well does a face analysis software put faces in the right age range. So under 13 to 16, the different age categories that especially you can see in the Roblox's program that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, it really depends. That it looks like the kind of average error rate for the top technologies, like the top 30 technologies on that is about 5%. So that's obviously it's not insignificant, but it's also not massive either.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets into I think it's complicated depending on the task that you're trying to do with the technology. So, for example, one of the other tests shows how good is the software at placing a person who's 17 in either below or not 18 or over 18 and over categories, which obviously is pretty hard to do when the difference between someone who's 17 and 18 can be pretty small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is how they appear, and so you definitely see higher error rates in that type of application. So there's different tests. There's age sort of gating, like above a certain age or not, and then there's which category you're in, or are you over a certain age? So
yeah, it's fascinating. People will look at that tech and point out its shortfalls, but they don't really factor in, when you look at the NIST lists and the benchmarks, that the best companies, it doesn't really apply, or certainly not at the same level with some of the, the ones further down the list.
Yeah, I think what you'll find is kind of something similar to earlier days in facial recognition technology, where you had some providers doing exceptionally well and others doing exceptionally poor. So it really depends on which software you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is important. I think it's also important to draw a distinction here, because face or age estimation software is not the same thing as facial recognition
mm-hmm.
technology. You're not doing biometric identification with it by matching photos. So that is also something I see reports about this kind of conflating that all together as one thing, but it's definitely different.
Yeah, and people think as well that I believe that the biometrics are retained, that this is going to be stored in a database somewhere. Whereas most of the companies that are leading the charge, they want to delete that data as quickly as possible. So I think there's do you feel that there's misunderstanding out there?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, and really, the privacy concerns, that may be there really, should depend on what is being done, what kind of data is being created, and what is done with it. So, in the case of age estimation, there isn't a need to retain that information. And from what I've read, the system that the company using deletes it right after it's processed for, analyzing an image for the age estimation. So if that's the case, then there really shouldn't be any privacy concerns, because that data is deleted. But also, even if it wasn't, there's not much it could be used for if it's not being matched to an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also, this is the same across all software like this, but the way in which it creates its own representation of the image and does the analytics, it's really unique to each software. Every software does it different, so it's not like interoperable somehow. Like you couldn't use something like data created by age estimation technology and then use it in some other like recognition platform.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to ask about and that we were going to speak about is sort of key privacy and security considerations as companies adopt facial age estimation in particular. And I think in addition to how you convince the people that it's safe and private, what are some of the other privacy and security considerations that people need to keep top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, certainly with there are one of the objections to the requiring this sort of thing has certainly been data collection, on children and what companies are going to do with the data. I mean, you may have good actors that are doing this correctly and minimizing their use and retention of data. But others may not, and that's certainly a concern about collecting images and profile information, things like that. Could be misused or overused, depending on who's doing it. So I think those concerns are definitely there. And I guess we'll see what happens as far as what people are comfortable with, as far as information they're allowing to be collected and processed, and what benefit they're getting from it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, talking about Roblox, it's a huge platform, millions and millions of users, and it's facing some pretty serious allegations about, lax child safety, about groomers being, allowed to kind of run amok on the platform. So when it takes up a technology like facial age estimation, what is at stake here for users, but for the industry in particular? Like, who's watching this with bated breath to see, okay, how's it going to hash out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, they're using, obviously, as you mentioned, they're using a third-party vendor, so I think it's definitely worth checking with them to see what further they might be able to say about the process. But that's certainly probably a good thing that they're outsourcing that essentially. But yeah, I mean, I think that just as someone who's children use the platform, I think that and I've seen actually this process, work for them so far. They've gone through, and I think it is good because at least if it works the way they intended to work, because there's so many people that are on the platform and they're all different ages. Like a lot of people started using this at the very beginning who are now like in their 20s, maybe even older, that are still gaming on the platform, believe it or not, with their friends and stuff. You've got others that are just coming into it like in elementary school, right? So you've got a huge range of ages on there. Obviously good to keep people, close to their peer groups and who they can actually chat with, things like that. So I think it's positive, if it works the way they intend.
Mm-hmm. Is Roblox really as bad as they say? Yeah. Is it as bad as they say? You say your kids use it. I mean, are these allegations legitimate? That it's sort of crawling with threat?
I mean, I haven't seen that, but there's so many users on it. I'm sure there's incidents that have happened. I mean.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's hard to generalize.
Fair enough. Yeah. On the government side, do you see in the States there being a push for any kind of federal legislation to addresses age assurance, age verification for whatever use case? Is that something you think that is going to pick up on that level?
I don't think it's going federal. There is some proposals to update the Children's Online Privacy Act.
That's right.
Law. I don't believe there's a age verification requirement in there, but it could. My understanding is it could be done to meet some of its other requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a lot of background, a lot of in-depth knowledge there, but. And it's a little bit different because I think under the U.S. framework, the user, like online user of a service, is assumed to be an adult unless there's reason to believe that they're a child, whereas I think in Europe it's the other way around. And so that just creates a different set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they're not going to be it's not going to include the kinds of things we've seen recently at the state level. So that is going to be a matter for the courts to ultimately decide.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that those amendments to COPA and the COSA, do you think they'll pass?
I think there's a good chance, just because it's seen as the first step towards addressing anything broader on data privacy or AI.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that seems to be the linchpin. Once they can reach an agreement on that, then they can potentially reach an agreement on bigger issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly bipartisan support for
it. You mentioned AI. That seems to be kind of the next frontier for this push to regulate stuff. AI chatbots have been flagged for, causing certain incidents, and there's some push to legislate those with age gates. Do you think that's something that's going to pick up momentum?
Yeah. I definitely think we're going to see chatbot bills at the state level introduced in multiple states heading into 26. That'll definitely be an interesting one to watch. Yeah,
for sure. Anything else predicted for 2026? What's next for child safety tech in the coming year?
Well, really, I think it is addressing those real kind of narrower issues like chatbot specific legislation having to do with access, right? And there's been the more successful AI measures at the state level have been specifically narrowly addressing certain harms. And so we could see more of that as far as bills addressing deep fakes and use of AI to create obscene material, things like that. Those types of bills have seen more success. It's the broader legislation kind of addressing AI uses across all kinds of sectors and purposes that have ran into more trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll definitely see more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're starting to see some nations starting to legislate likeness,
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think certainly the security industry, many of our members of SIA produce age estimation technology.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the leading providers of it on the NIST leaderboards are certainly SIA members. There's a role I think they have to play in all of this. I think really the question is what's going to be required versus just become best practice.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I think there's a huge role, especially as the technology continues to improve.
Will you be watching Australia on December 10th to see how the social media law fallout sort of, hashes out?
I've heard about this, yeah. I've heard about it, yeah. That will be interesting.
Yeah, it's a big day for Australian teens. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. Again, I really appreciate you chatting on a Friday. It's been great to talk, and it certainly is a space in which things are changing daily, so lots to watch in the coming year.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again to Jake Parker of the Security Industry Association for joining us today. I'm Joel McConvey, and you've been listening to the Biometric Update Podcast. For all of the latest biometrics and digital identity news, be sure to check out www.biometricupdate.com.